Hey, I have I'm back in programming mode at work. Because usually my job doesn't involve programming, but this is a big enough project that it's enough to consume my brain, all my CPU cycles. So that just means I have a big thing to write on, and then I pace a lot. So I have I have an office. Actually, I have an office now. It has a door and everything, a ceiling. It's very, very. I feel very important. But it's not, it's not huge. But I get like pacing back and forth. I get like 5 steps, and then I turn around and pace 5 steps back. I don't know, pacing always helped me think. I don't understand why, but it always has. As far back as I can remember, if I'm figuring something out, I'm pacing. Like if it's pure thought, I'm pacing. And I usually have music or something on, something that blocks out the outside world, because my brain doesn't really want to focus on one thing at a time. It wants to focus on everything. And when I try to make it focus on one thing, if it is even slightly distracted, it'll expand that distraction until I'm focused on it. So music helps, and pacing for whatever reason helps. There was a show that my kids watched. Well, I watched it too. It was a pretty alright show, actually. The animation was terrible. Called Cyber Chase. And I think it was a PBS presentation. But it had a lot of, like, practical mathematics and planning skills in it. And it was pretty interesting. Like, pretty informative, too. I think it was good. But the kids in the show, whenever they get into like deep thought, when they're trying to figure out a problem, they do different things. One of them paces. I think the other one lays down, and another one has a yo-yo, and he'll run that yo-yo while he's thinking and trying to figure stuff out. And he'll be like trying to figure something out, and the guy's like, "I need my yo-yo." It's weird, but we work with, it doesn't matter. Yeah, that's what I've learned. It doesn't matter. What works is what works. You don't have to understand why it works, or how it works, or wonder why it can't be something different and try to change it. Just acknowledge what works and move on. Accept it. A whiteboard and white space for me has been very good at brainstorming. I don't know what it is. Digital white space, like as is available on whoa, buddy. As is available on OneNote, where you have an endless canvas of space on which to write. I found that really useful, really helpful, really liberating. And then, as I've mentioned before, like I have an art book. It's a very large sheets of paper on a spiral bound, not spiral bound, but that binding that isn't annoying like spiral binding. But you can flip the whole thing and then hold it flat, and then you've got a nice empty area to fill up. But at work, I've got this Post-it note pad, like the giant kind, and it came with an easel that had a whiteboard on it. And I took the... What's going on over there? These people are weird today. It has Post-it notes on it. So the giant Post-it note pad goes on the easel, and I had taken it off and used the whiteboard portion. But then I realized I could just take off the Post-it notes and put them on the wall and write on the wall. So I'm like, pace, 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 stop, right, pace, pace, arrow, connection, pace, pace. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Back in my day, back when I was working at the Knock, we were in a data center, and the knock was in the data center, and that was when we had the most light, probably. And they wanted me to develop something for, well, I wanted to develop it, and it was a good fit, and they let me develop it. But yeah, it was a definite improvement off what we had. But I made some middleware for our front end, for our front end monitoring software, because it wasn't ideal for us, and the middleware could kind of hook into the web portions of it and pull data. This was before JavaScript, so wow, that's saying something. Ugh. Yeah. So it was middleware. Man, it was middleware that would connect to it, and I needed space to work in, and they had a nice room for us. It was relatively large, but it didn't have a lot of amenities because it was like we weren't in our own building. We just had that room in that building, and we would do our monitoring and any work on the computer from there. But I needed like a whiteboard. I needed a space, and I didn't have one. And what we did have was our room had windows. Like, you know, it was a data center. There were thick bulletproof glass windows for some reason. I don't know. Customers are like, oh, it's so secure. Like, yeah, this room inside this giant data center is secure. Whatever. So I had these windows, and I'm like, so can I get some dry erase markers? And I just started filling up the windows with these. At that point, it was clouds. I've kind of updated my structure for drawing this stuff out, but you know, these clouds of things, and this connects to that, and that has to go into here, and no, that's not going to work. I need to move this over there. These two can be absorbed. I had like 4 windows, and I filled up 3 of them. And then my boss is like, leave it up there, it looks cool. Just because I had to, you know, you kind of have to brain out the structure beforehand. All the programming work should begin on paper, or you know, not in actual programming, because you need. And this is where I really started to think of it as architecture, because you really are architecting. You're really architecting something. You're building something that needs to fit with the other pieces. You need to understand what it needs to do day 1, and what it's going to experience on day 2, and then, you know, how it's going to look on day 1000. And only after you've figured out those things, you can decide how it needs to look, how you need to build it. If you start building, you know, before you've figured a lot of that stuff out, you paint yourself into corners, bad corners. And if you're lucky, you get to start over. And if you're not lucky, you have to build on top of it. You know, you get to fix stuff on top of the broken stuff, which just makes everything more complicated. But it's fun. I like that. I like all problem solving, so it's neat. Oh, and I got to use, you know, fountain pen. It's nice. It's really cool. I've always been very interested in, or taken by, curves and lines. You know, the idea that you can just make a squiggle on a piece of paper and then sketch that squiggle into something else, or imagine what it could be, and then fill it out. Plus the fact that squiggle, you know, if you make it fast enough, I'm not talking about like it's got to be exactly this and designed with perfect proportions. I'm just talking about, you know, you freehand, you just start making curves, making lines, and then adding to them. It's just those lines. If you get them, I don't know what it is. You get the line like just right, even just to make like a swoop, just a really nice, smooth, single motion swoop that starts well curves well and then ends well. I don't know. It's weird, but I get this from the fountain pen. The lines are so smooth. It's very easy to write with, and I can be really fine when I want to, which I do a lot. But I can make something, and I'm like, I want to connect here to up here, and like, how do I want that arrow to look? And it's like, zoop, and I don't know, something about the curves. I don't know. I'm sure it's an art thing, but it inspires work. And like I said, you don't have to understand it. And frankly, I wish I could overcome it. To sit there and be like, well, everything has to be just so. It doesn't have to be well, it kind of does. If you want to work optimally, you need to figure out what that thing is that you need and how to get everything just right in order for you to function at 100%. And I'm not talking about, give it 110%, working extra hard. I mean, in truth, in honesty, you're usually only working at like 40%. And I mean that. I mean, unless you are direct, I'm sawing on this log. For that period of log sawing, you are 100% sawing on that log. But when you get into more abstract professions, or professions that have more dimensions to it, I guess, it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to switch back and forth. It's easy to feel like you're spinning your wheels. It's easy to be at the end of the day and be like, I don't feel like I got anything done. And it kind of sucks. It's not fun. And I do appreciate that. And I'll be really happy to get into some manual labor after a long period of pushing ones and zeros around, because I get sick of it. I feel like I'm not doing anything. And physical labor, I think, is good for the soul, or good for the whatever you are. It's just good. So making something and doing something and being like, I have a finished product, behold my creation. Just men trying to be able to create a thing that isn't life. You can only push around ones and zeros for so long before you got to do something physical. All right, I got an appointment, so I'll catch you later.